Welcome in, everyone, to this week's episode of What's Bruin. I am your host, Chris Nozick. We are presented, as always, now by IceShaker, the shaker bottle that was on ABC's Shark Tank. They've sold over 1 million of them, and you can get yours by going to IceShaker.com. Again, they are now partnered with the NFL, which you should turn off because, well, the Patriots aren't worth watching right now. Anyway, the NBA, the NCAA, MLB, and of course, the NHL. So before we dive into everything, I got to welcome in my co-host, the one, the only, Dominic Tiano. Dom, how are you?
I'm doing great, Chris. Always excited to talk some hockey. As you know, we sit here a couple of minutes before going live, and I'm counting down the clock for you. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Tired, ready for the holidays, and ready. As weird as it is to say for them to be over, but not in a negative way. Definitely have some time off coming up at work, but it's all going to be hectic with everything going on. But you know what? It's fun. It'll be nice that we don't have to crowd around for all the hockey and all that stuff. They have their break coming up as well, so a little less stressful because of that. But nice to know that the Bruins did not break the Buffalo Sabres losing streak or winning. Like they were not the ones that broke that streak.
Yeah, it's although I tell you,
They
for
played like they wanted to.
two and a half periods, it did not look like the Bruins under Joe Sacco. That's for sure.
No, they definitely looked like they wanted to give that one away, but they managed to hang on. We got Tyler in the chat, Kevin's in the chat, Matrix in the chat, JD in the chat. Definitely want to know everyone's thoughts and questions. Hello to all of you. Like the show, share the show, help us out with that algorithm. You guys all know what it is that helps us, so we appreciate that. Merry Christmas to all of you as well, and thank you for joining us. Dom, last week when we came on here, they were not exactly doing well on the West Coast road trip. And then I'd say they managed to salvage it. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I agree. With Calgary, they showed some resilience and ability to come back. I believe it's the second time under Joe Sacco that they came from behind in the third to win a hockey game, and I believe they'd only done it twice under Jim Montgomery, dating back to late last season. So that was good. Um, Against Edmonton, a remarkable first period. Absolutely um, stoned them, which goes to show they can play with these elite teams. Unfortunately, they didn't keep it up for three periods and gave up the lead in that one, sort of the opposite of what happened in Calgary.
Yeah, and it's tough to really harp on them too much. One, it's Edmonton, it's Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. Like, there's just a wave of you know amazing hockey player coming at you throughout the entire game. So between that and it's the last road game of a 5-game roadie, like across Western US and Canada, like it was not conducive. You actually called it a scheduled loss going into it. Once I saw the first period though, I was like, they might actually come out of this with a win. Couldn't hang on. I can't really get
Yeah,
on them too much though, because they did take the crucial point from it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, they deserve a lot of credit for that first period. Um, I think in a way that played into their game last night. When you're on the road for 2 weeks and it's your first game back, um, you feel it a little bit, both in your personal life and game life. So, uh,
Yeah.
understandably, when they turned it on in the third period, I think it was just after the disallowed goal for Geeky, they really turned it on in the third period. So they got their legs really late. Um, but based on that, they should have won the game. Corpusalo was at least solid, kept it in it, which is what you want your goaltender to do for you, is give you the chance to win.
Yeah, Matrix mentions that they had some tired legs after the West Coast, and Bruce says just win those trap games, ugly but take the W. That really kind of seems like what Saturday was yesterday against Buffalo. I had my eyes, admittedly, half on that game, maybe a quarter. I was at the Providence game, kind of taking in some of that. So had that on my iPad, so I was watching it. But that is, I agree from what I could see, when it really seemed like the Bruins found their legs and said, okay, we've half-assed it for long enough. If we're not careful, this game will get away from us. Let's not let that happen. And they took it to the Sabres and just said, we're just going to win this and go home.
Yeah. And it's too bad that Geeky first goal was called because he had a really good game. um, but you have to question what Pasternak was thinking there. There's no way, no reason an NHL player should put the playoff side in that position, in that situation at that time. And I don't know what to make of it. It just shouldn't have happened, and it's too bad. I said at the time, I said Pasternak owes Geeky one, and he made up for it on the game winner. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, it was rough to see that one taken off the board. I thought that Geeky was going to end up with 2 called back, because I thought, again, half looking at the game, I thought that Buffalo was going to challenge that second one for goaltender interference, but they opted not to, and
Yeah,
I'll take it.
I don't think they would have won that challenge.
I didn't see it enough. I saw like the replay. I think it was the overhead replay, and I just saw a little bit of contact, and it looked like they were trying to delay it a little bit, like the return to play. So then I found out they had taken a timeout. So I don't know. I have to go back and rewatch the whole game with 100% attention, not while I'm trying to watch a second game in person, uh, which was in of itself a very interesting affair between Hartford and Providence. So we'll talk more about that one tomorrow, though. So, what did you think? So obviously, the back end with Edmonton and now Buffalo yesterday, we got to see Wahlstrom added to the lineup, and yesterday we saw Brazeau come out. We saw Frederic move to third line center. What did you think about the new look lineup before the game, and then how did that thought process change after watching that lineup actually play the game?
Brazeau didn't come out yesterday.
Not Brazeau.
McLaughlin came out
McLaughlin
yesterday.
came out. Sorry.
um,
Brazeau got moved to the left. That's what I was
it's
thinking of.
it's about what I expected for the first couple of games. He played under 10 minutes both games. I think under 9 minutes the first game. Um, he needs to learn the system and adjust. But what I did see is what I always suspected. He's good defensively. He understands how to play defense. Um, he will need to, of course, again learn the system and where to be, especially when it comes to the breakout. Because there were a couple of times you could tell that he was wondering where he should be and what he should be doing. I think the issue, I think we may have talked about it last week a little bit. His skating concerns me. It's not that he's slow. I think since the surgery, um, there's something wrong with his technique. And I don't know whether he's feeling something that he's, maybe some discomfort or something. It just doesn't feel right that he's trying to adjust. So um, the skating and skills guys are going to have to get with him and work on him with it because his technique looks off and different from what I remember it.
Yeah, he's averaging about 920 in the 2 games that he's been with Boston. So again, not a prime look, but I mean, when he is on the ice, though, he's not, in my opinion, he's not completely and totally lost. If that makes sense, he has a
Yeah.
general idea of where to be. It's not perfect, obviously, but we're talking less than 20 minutes on the ice in game time action with a whole new team. That will come as they get more time together in practice, morning skates, and of course during more games. So you mentioned the injury and the recovery. JD asked a question. Oh, let me see if I can get it pulled up. Here we go. Is Pasternak dealing with an upper body injury? His upper body looks stiff. He's not bending or twisting much. Maybe a back rib or an injury or a rib injury. We know he had off-season issues this past summer. So I know we don't really want to speculate on injuries, but what are your thoughts on how Pasternak's playing and kind of the way he's moving?
Well, wasn't it just 2 weeks ago that he was questionable for a game because Sacco said he was dealing with
Yeah, it was on
something,
the
but he
road
ended
trip.
up playing anyway? Yeah. So obviously, where there's smoke, there's fire.
I would say so, at least in this instance.
Yeah. You know, people tend to look at the shot. He's still tied for the league lead in shots on goal, I believe. Um, but he's become a complete offensive player. He has the last couple of years. He's not just a goal scorer. He's able to set up teammates, and I don't care whether he's setting up the goal or he's scoring it himself. As long as they're scoring, that's all that matters.
Yeah, really. And it's funny because in his last 5 games, he has 5 assists and 2 goals. So yeah, he might not be scoring as much, but if Morgan Geeky's looking a hell of a lot better right now.
Yeah. What's Geeky at? 8 points in his last 8 games or something
Geeky right now,
like that.
he's got 3 goals in his last 5 and 4 points. He's got an assist as well from that Vancouver game. So, and really in the last 4 games, he has 3 goals and 1 assist. So the one game in the last 5 that he didn't score was the Seattle game. So
Yeah. So I'm happy for Geeky. He's seems to have found his game. He's starting to work with Zach and Pasternak.
he's
We said it was going to
yeah,
take
he's taking
time,
a lot of
but
heat. I'm gonna single you out, Brett. Your geeky bump is still working, but Brett from Only Bruins made a couple comments on Twitter, and Geeky responded to him. But ever since then, he's been on fire. So good on Brett for standing tall because he's caught some shit for it, and good for Geeky for responding and getting these goals. He's now up to 7 goals on the year, 6 assists. He's looking a lot better. So
yeah, I mean he could surpass last year's goal scorer.
yeah, he really could, and they would definitely need him to. Um, it's kind of funny because we saw Danton Heinen last year in this spot. Now, I guess the real question is we just talked about Pasternak. He's not scoring, but he's getting assists right now. Geeky is scoring and not getting nearly as many assists. Would we be seeing the same type of production from this type of injured Pasternak if it was Danton Heinen on his wing as opposed or on the opposite wing as opposed to Morgan Geeky?
Oh, I don't know. That's impossible to answer.
Right. I guess my question
Uh,
is does Morgan Geekie have a better offensive upside ceiling than we've been giving him credit for? And is it starting to shine because a player as talented as Pasternak is finding him where he is so he can find the back of the net?
I will say this: Heinen cannot shoot the puck like Morgan Geekie can. Morgan Geekie can absolutely rip the puck. So can Pavel Zacha, and so can David Pasternak. So Pasta is playing with two guys who can really shoot the puck. Uh, so it only benefits them as a line and a team if Pasternak can help set them up as much as it is him taking the shots.
Right. Geeky Kevin says Geeky is looking like the kid we thought he'd be at right wing 2 with Coyle and Marchand. I mean, if he settles in this left wing first line or second line spot next to Zacha and Pasternak, I mean, that kind of solves the left wing problem that we thought this team has. And I guess the question then is, was this take one step forward with Geeky, have a couple bit of rough stretches to get him adapted with Zacha and Pasternak, and then now all of a sudden we're starting to see the three of them have figured out how to play with each other, and that's a solid line that you can keep together moving forward.
All I know is this, with 100% certainty. If Jim Montgomery was still coach, Geeky wouldn't have gotten this long a rope to see if they could gel. That much I would bank your mortgage and my mortgage on.
Yeah, I'd probably take that bet too.
Is Geeky the ideal solution on that line with Zacha and Pasternak? No. Is he the ideal solution of all the players available to Joe Sacco? Right now, yes.
Yeah, and it's paying off. Matrix says Geeky is definitely outplaying Frederic, who's been all but invisible. We're gonna get to Frederic. We've got a lot to go on Frederic. But yeah, I mean, Geeky is definitely earning that line. In fact, I believe since Matrix mentioned Frederic, if you recall, a couple months ago, I was saying I wanted to see Freddie on that line. Frederic, Zacha, Pasternak. I don't want to see that. I like what Geeky is doing.
No.
Frederic has been almost non-existent at times. I don't think he's long for this roster, and we'll dive into him a little bit. But JD also points out confidence makes a big difference. It does look like Geeky is playing with a lot more confidence now than he was before. A couple goals in a few games really helps with that. So it does beg the question that David has here. Would you extend Morgan Geeky?
Yes.
Would you extend Trent Frederic? Let's circle to Frederic now.
It depends on the price.
Absolutely. I know you put a couple polls out on Twitter not too long ago about the price of what people would re-sign Frederic for. Ironically, I put out a poll that people overwhelmingly said that if you were to trade them, you would get more for Trent Frederic than you would Morgan Geekie. What do you think about that? I also threw Justin Brazeau in there just to see how that would extend the vote. Of those three, who do you think you'd get a bigger return in a trade with if you were to move them this year?
I would think it would be Trent Frederic. Because GMs are just infatuated with that type of player. I don't know. There's going to be somebody out there that thinks that he can be a Tom Wilson light on some roster, and they're willing to pay for that. I don't think you can say that about Morgan Geeking. You certainly can't say it about Justin Brazeau.
I agree. I think Frederic would net him. JD says that it would extend him. at reasonable money. If you can't, have to trade him, let him walk. Matrix says anything over $3.5 million for Frederic, I don't sign him. Now,
I don't know that at this point I would go $3.5 million.
I was gonna say I don't know I'd go that high either. Let me see if I can still find it. You had done a poll not too long ago about the cost of re-signing him. I think you did it last year too, and you compared the results.
Mm-hmm.
But you did also just have a piece come out on Dom.Hockey about what to do with Frederic. You want to share a little bit about that while I'm looking for this?
Yeah, so everybody knows the rumors that are out there that teams are calling Don Sweeney and asking what their intentions are with with Trent Frederic. I can tell you through a source with the St. Louis Blues, they would not, he or she would neither confirm nor deny that they have had discussions with Don Sweeney, but would confirm to me that there has been internal discussions. And Jim Montgomery is all for acquiring Trent Frederic and bringing. Let's not forget, Trent Frederic had his best 2 seasons playing for Jim Montgomery. Didn't start out so well this year, but neither did anybody else on the roster under Montgomery. So I know your next question, Chris, is going to be who would the Blues be offering?
No, because that's what Kevin
and
would
I'm not
say.
going to get
That's
into
what
that.
Kevin is going to say. I would ask about. I'm going to bring up Kevin's comment here where he says, "I'm not going over $2 million for Freddie right now," which is kind of funny because I did find it, and this I'm going to pull it up. I was able to get it so we can pull it up. You had done this poll, and you can see from 2023 July, people were at around 1.75 to 2 million to extend him. And now people are falling between 2.3 and 4 million on average across the board. Pretty good vote totals in here as well. So it looks like people have, despite his bad play, over or slow start, whatever you want to call it, people are valuing him more now than they did in July. I don't know why that would be, especially given the slow start, but I do agree with you. I think someone out there is going to overpay for him, or we would be willing to overpay for him at the deadline. I think it was last week when we were talking about Frederic. You said, and I agree with you. I think some desperate team who's a playoff team will look at him, like you said, Tom Wilson light. He's going to help us as we go into the playoffs, and they will offer a first-round pick.
I think so. Look, I know I'm going to refer to bench rates, benchrates.com. They do a marvelous job in basically determining what a player is earning off their contract. And I know people don't refer to them because they're new and so on and so forth, and it's difficult to understand what they're doing. This is created by a former professional hockey player. So he knows what values and contributions to a team should be. And they have Frederic playing at a $1.3 million level right now. That's this season. Okay. I know there's a lot of arguments going back and forth amongst fans. They look at Frederic's plus minus being the worst on the team, I believe, at minus 13. Other fans saying you can't use plus minus as a statistic because it's an irrelevant stat. I will say this: plus minus without context is an irrelevant stat.
Yes.
Plus minus with context is a relevant stat. You have to understand the context with it. You can't in 1 minute always refer to goal differential on a team. Let's say compare the Bruins to Florida in goal differential, because what is goal differential? Goal differential is plus minus.
Right.
That's all it is. You cannot be an advocate for goal differential and state how important it is and then dismiss individual players on the team and their plus minus.
It's the same thing.
You can't have it both
right.
ways.
And I agree with you 100%. I have two rules when it comes to the plus minus statistic, as you mentioned. One, like you said, what's the context? Is the context, consistent with what it should be? Because anybody can step on the ice, put a foot on the ice, coming over the boards, and their team scores, and now they're plus one. And it can go the other direction. So it doesn't really mean anything without that context. The only time, and there is some actual context to it, that you can really look at it is if there's a massive disparity. And by that, I mean a significant plus statistic or significant minus statistic over the duration of a period of time. Because, and even then, it's more of a broad stroke kind of thing. So, for instance, one of the players that I like to use as an example for this, Patrice Bergeron, right? He was career plus 289. Okay. That means over the course of his career, good things happened more frequently when he was on the ice. That's all that means. He was on the ice for 1,200 plus games, almost 1,300 games. That in of itself is a huge sample size. So now all of a sudden, that's changed the context. But anyway, we can rant about some of the way statistics are kept all night as well, because that's a whole other gripe itself. David says, if the Blues for Frederic are in the mix, would you be concerned about tampering? We're hearing about Andlauer up in Ottawa, upset about Brady Tkachuk's name being thrown out there by the Rangers, saying he's not available. That's this new soft tampering, quote unquote. Would you have any concern about this if the Blues are that interested in Frederic and that's where he ends up?
No, none whatsoever.
Would it bother you?
None whatsoever. No.
Does it bother you at all with the soft tampering allegations that New York supposedly could face from Andlauer throwing his little hissy fit over Brady Tkachuk rumors and all that stuff? Because that's where this is stemming from.
To me, it boils down to Don Sweeney has to do his job now.
I'm just asking the question because I host the show, all right? I get it.
No, Chris, it's a hypothetical you're throwing at me, okay? And you know how I feel about hypotheticals. The fact of the matter is he's a pending unrestricted free agent. You've said now for 3 months that you've talked to his camp to try and sign him. Obviously, you're unable to. You continue those negotiations, trying to come to a mutually agreeable contract. If you cannot, then Don Sweeney has to decide, do I use him as my own rental or do I get something back for him? Do I create another Jake DeBrusk situation or do I get something back for him? Okay. My level of anger won't be directed at Trent Frederic if he goes to UFA and signs with St. Louis. It will be towards management for not recognizing the situation that they're in and doing something about it. 3 months, it was September 30th, Don Sweeney said, I've had discussions with Frederic's camp, Marchand's camp, and Geeky's camp.
Mm-hmm. And we don't have contracts for any of them
3
yet.
months.
So,
Right.
and I feel better about the Marchand situation than I do about the Frederic situation and the Geeky situation. I think his slow start may have kind of halted some stuff there, but he's going into restricted free agency. So there's a little bit of difference there. I'm with you.
Exactly.
I get it. I would have no concerns about it too. And quite frankly, I think Andlauer's just whining right now because he's upset that his key player keeps getting brought up in the media and doesn't really matter. If you truly know that your player is not available, then you can have a sit-down conversation with them and say, ignore the media. It is what it is. They're doing a job for clicks. We have no interest in moving you unless you say otherwise. Period. Done. So let's see. JD says Frederic has been used in a defensive checking role more than an offensive role.
That's not entirely true. Not under Sacco. Trent Frederic right now has the lowest defensive zone starts in his career since the 2019-2020 season. And it's even lower under Joe Sacco. He's averaging 54.1% defensive zone starts on the year. It was higher under Montgomery. And that's lower by 3 to 4% on every one of his seasons in the NHL except the 1920 season. Why it looks like, and I'll refer to last night as a prime example, why it looks like he's getting more defensive responsibilities is because his line was hemmed in its own zone for almost the entirety of shifts. He wasn't out against Calgary or say Edmonton. He was out there against Draisaitl. He wasn't out there against McDavid. Those are key defensive situations. Frederic's not getting any of those. So I disagree with that because the stats just say that isn't true. Somebody made the comment that his line was 26% on the dot last night. Okay, Wahlstrom was 3 for 3 on faceoffs. Wahlstrom was 100%. Frederic took the rest.
Yeah. I'll see if I can find.
Okay, so
I don't have the box score. Do you know how well Frederic did? What his numbers were on the dot?
no, I'm not going to look it up. It's just I know it wasn't good. So yeah, Frederic has defensive responsibilities, but he's not getting thrown into prime defensive responsibilities, and he's getting more ozone starts under Sacco.
Yeah, I was gonna say it. Just eye test wise, like, yeah, they all have defensive responsibilities when they're out there. I think people have this notion in their head, third line checking defensive shutdown role, but that's not. They do still are supposed to have some of that offensive push, and that when you don't have that offensive push from down there, then it looks like all they're trying to do is shut the opposition down. The problem is they are not having that offensive push. That's what's missing from that third line, and Freddie is supposed to help drive that. Kevin also mentions even if Freddie turned it on with a solid amount of goals between now and the deadline, I'm still trading him because I'm not bringing him back, and this team isn't winning a cup. I agree on trading him regardless because if he starts going on a heater and scoring goals, he's just going to up his value anyway. Big Bad Bruin Joe says Kostelic is a priority before Freddie. Thoughts on that sentiment?
It's an easier priority. Kostelic's not going to cost as much as Frederic, so it's going to be an easier contract to get done.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's priority. It's just the way it may work out.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Kostelic Beecher, that combination is solid on the fourth line. So JD says they've used him on the power play on the Sacco. I think he means with Joe Sacco. And yeah, Frederic has seen some power play time. Not a lot, but Mike says the third line was a slog last night. Well, from my understanding, a lot of the game was for most of the game. So
Uh,
I was
this
just going to pull
comment
David's
from
comment
David
up.
Polmers.
It says if Frederic knows the Blues will and maybe have offer, especially on term, Frederic won't sign with another organization, limiting what the Bruins can get in return.
You know how often do we hear things like that? Like Noah Hannafin knew the Bruins were interested in him, could have signed as a free agent with the Bruins. No, as soon as he was acquired in a trade, bingo, signs an extension. It's
a massive one.
yeah. I mean, it happens all the time. Players are traded, they sign an extension almost right away. The Bruins did it with Hampus Lindholm.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean he can't get traded to some other team and then still end up a Blue, but like it just every player situation is different as well. We don't know what the player's thinking. If the he has no trade protection, so he can't go to the Bruins and say you have to send me to the Blues or else I'm not doing anything. It's the Bruins can say, well, too bad, we're going to ship you out to here. And you really think if another team that has a good chance at winning, in the playoffs offers him an extension, he won't consider it? Hey, come on, get real. If he hits unrestricted free agency and the Vegas Golden Knights call him up and they offer him a deal, you think he won't consider it?
And I guarantee you, teams are going to want to talk to him before they make a trade for him.
Yeah, for sure.
So they'll have an idea.
For sure.
But you'd be surprised. Not every player is John Tavares. You'd be surprised how many teams or how many players don't want to play for their hometown team.
Right. And also, not every player is Taylor Hall, where they sit there and they say, I'm only going to get traded to this team. That's the only team I'm willing to waive my no movement clause for. So if you're trying to say that an extension being held over their head is going to act like a no trade clause, that's just wrong. Anyway, last week we missed something, and I want to make sure we address it. We'll talk a little bit more about it in depth tomorrow because he would be more of a considered a prospect. But last week we neglected to mention that the Bruins waived and lost Alec Regula to the Oilers. I think you pointed that out on Tuesday to me, like right after the show. I honestly thought we had done it the week before, just completely losing track of the timeline. Let's just say longer term implications or this year's implications for a loss like Regula. He was a solid depth piece for this blue line, which, let's face it, without Hampus Lindholm is struggling.
Yeah. By the way, he played against the Bruins. He's in the NHL now.
Well, yeah, if they waive him, then the Bruins get him back.
Yeah, well, any other team that put in an offer would have first crack at him. First.
Oh, I didn't even know another team claimed him.
I don't know if they have or not, but that's the way it works. They would have first rights to him. Again, if I don't like the Bruins' depth on the right side. If anything happened to Peak or Carlo, Regula would have been, if he was healthy at 100%, would have been my first call up on the right-hand side. That's just me.
I think that's where
So
they were
now
going.
their depth on the right side took a hit.
They don't have a lot of depth to begin with on defense. I mean, I know in this most
Yeah.
recent game we saw Osterley playing with Carlo. We've seen that a little bit. Zadorov back with McAvoy. I know I've said it before. I like Lori with Peak. What do you think of those other four? You think they're still trying to figure that out? Um, and or is that just something that's kind of a matchup based thing?
I think it's a matchup-based thing, and I think they're just trying to hold the fort until Lindholm comes back.
Which, of course, we say his name. It's like Beetlejuice. We say Hampus Lindholm's name 3 times, and someone asks the question, "Any idea when he's coming back?" So I haven't
um,
heard anything. I don't know if you have.
I don't know. I mean, I would hope that he's back very early in January. I think that's the timeline, is late December, early January. um, at this point, you're not in a position to rush him. So you let him get as close to 100% as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you're not free falling out of the division race. You're 4 points behind Florida
No.
and Toronto, who are in the lead, and you've only played one more game than them. The schedule's going to catch up. We talked about the Lightning last week. Yes, you've got a couple of games in hand on them, or they've got some on you, but they have to win them, and a lot of them are in the division. As you pointed out, they're not doing well in the division.
They have yet to beat a divisional opponent.
They've only had 3 games, so I really can't say they suck against the division,
Doesn't
but
matter.
they're not doing well. They're 0 for 3.
But you look at everybody else in the division and their record within the division, with the exception of Buffalo and Montreal. Uh, everyone else is holding their own.
Yeah, yeah. Ottawa's holding their own.
But what it means when you've got 5 games in hand, like Tampa does, is between, let's say, the new year and the end of the season, you're playing a lot more back-to-backs than everybody else. You're playing a lot more 3 games in 4 days than everybody else. Games in hand mean absolutely nothing till you win them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Tyler's got a good question here. Who gets waived and who gets scratched when Hampus is back? I mean, that's assuming everybody else stays healthy enough to not have to go on IR themselves.
Well, I would assume that it's either Waterspoon or Osterley. I assume they're going to go back to 7 defensemen and 13 forwards. The only guy on the roster right now that doesn't need to clear waivers is Mark McLaughlin.
Yeah, and he's got
But
one more
you
game.
send him down. Mark McLaughlin doesn't need waivers. He's waiver exempt.
When does he need when does he start requiring waivers though?
Next year.
Oh, okay. I thought he had a couple more games this year that if he hits,
No.
then he'll qualify.
No.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't think they're going to carry 8 defensemen, so it'd be between Waterspoon and Osterley.
Yeah. I know earlier in his call up, we were talking about Osterley and them potentially carrying 8 defensemen, but that was also when they had Johnson still on the roster and his roster spot could be made available. And it just seems like Johnson wasn't a fit with Sacco. He was more of a Montgomery system kind of ad, and McLaughlin as well fits what Sacco's looking for. He really seems to like him on the 4th line. And I know we talked about him at nauseum before, but I really feel like Sacco isn't really a huge fan of Trent Frederic.
It's funny because I was having this conversation with our friend Court just the other day about it, and um, Bruce Cassidy had no issues with benching Trent Frederic or healthy scratching him or any of that. And as Court pointed out to me when we were talking about it, he said, "Who was the assistant coach at the time?" Joe Sacco. Um, I don't think Montgomery ever scratched Frederick. Um, and I don't know what's going on with Waterspoon. Um, I think Waterspoon has the edge over Osterley because he can play both sides. Um, but I don't think Jay Leach is a big fan of having defensemen play on their offside.
I was gonna say we don't usually see him do it that much.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's a weird one because coming into the season, everybody penciled Waterspoon as the seventh D, and he's lost that. Now, mind you, he's still the seventh D, but that's because Lindholm is out and Osterley's taken his place. So,
Yeah. Matrix
um,
says to me, Frederick doesn't fit the Sacco type system.
um, I don't know that I can agree with that.
I don't know if I would say I agree with it
Um,
in full.
I don't agree with it in full because Trent Frederic is a very capable forechecker. He's very capable of getting pucks in behind the goal line, fighting for pucks, getting possession, and working from behind the opposition goal line. He's capable of that. We've seen it. He's capable of winning board battles. He's capable of uh, winning 50-50 pucks, which are all things that Sacco expects uh, from his forwards. He also expects them to come back on defense to back check, force the opposition forwards um, to attack and allowing his defensemen to keep gaps close and break up plays at the blue line. We know Frederic's capable of that because we've seen it in the past. It's just not happening for him right now. So I don't totally agree that he's not made for the Sacco system. As a matter of fact, I would say I would go the other way and say the Sacco system is ideal for a Trent Frederic type player. You look at Kostelic or Kepke or even Mark McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Um, they're thriving under the Sacco system, and Trent Frederic is just a better version, or should be a better version of those three guys.
Yeah. It's interesting to see and talk through the Frederick situation, I guess is the best way to put it. He should be playing better than he is. And, maybe this is just I mean, we see it. How often do we see it where a player comes in? David says, should we discuss Frederick's playoff stats? Um, but how often do we see it where a player comes into their first team and they hang around, they do all right, there's some ups, there's some downs, they're okay. They maybe get a second contract with that team, and you go, they should be better than they are. I can't quite put my finger on it. And then they're part of a trade, whether they're the main piece or they move teams, and on their second team, all of a sudden they just skyrocket in their performance. Sometimes that's all it is.
Yeah, it sometimes change of scenery does wonders for players. Um, And
He's
I mean, it's worked for Jake DeBrusk. It could work for Trent Frederic.
right. Frederick's been with this
um,
organization since 2016. It's the only organization he's
mm,
ever known. If he goes somewhere else and they come to him and they say, "Hey, try X, Y, and Z," and he's able to go, "Hey, wait, in Boston they were telling me to do this. If I partner what Boston was telling me with this new thing that I just learned, now all of a sudden he's elevated his game and maybe he's, a lot more consistent." Because the issue with Frederick is his consistency.
yeah. Um, I think his compete level has kind of declined as well.
Yeah,
If I'm being
I
honest.
think this year that's definitely something that you can see have a toll on him. Um, it's funny because we were talking about how he fits Sacco's system and the Montgomery system versus the Bruce Cassidy system, and I don't think any of us will are hard to forget his exit interview in, I think it was Cassidy's last season as coach, where he was asked what could he do to improve his game and kind of get more time in the lineup, and he just kind of sits there and goes, "I don't know, shoot more." So clearly there was a disconnect in communication. If that's resolved between him and Sacco, like you said, he should fit it better. Clearly there was a connection.
Uh,
What's that?
no, I
I was just going to
agree.
say, clearly there's a connection that he has with Jim Montgomery, that they understand each other. They're able to communicate on a different level. And maybe that's what Frederick needs to thrive. And yes, Matrix, that change of scenery is what we're all hoping for with Wahlstrom. That he's able to find his game here in Boston. It would be nice, and the Bruins could certainly use the winger. Um, he certainly makes him a better roster position than Tyler Johnson did, at least in my opinion. I think Johnson became expendable. He just didn't force their hand enough to keep him in the lineup.
Yeah, that right side for Boston after Pasternak is weak, like really weak.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. I like Frederick on the right side. I've said that before on the show, so I wouldn't mind seeing him move back to the right side. But Wahlstrom, let's see how he is. If he is able to find it, as Kevin says, kid's looked good so far, pretty decent. So if he can continue to build on it, maybe he is that second line right wing solution, and you're able to go Pasternak, Wahlstrom, Brazeau. Brazeau on the third line, right where he belongs. And then you have, McLaughlin on the fourth line right wing, and that kind of solves that issue. But he's got to, I'm gonna give Wahlstrom a good, what, 10-game run, maybe at least a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think he gets that under Sacco. He wouldn't get it under Montgomery. That much
No,
we
last
know.
night he would have been playing with every line under Montgomery. That's another thing, is I'm glad we're not seeing the line shakeups. I don't mind seeing them. I did catch when this lineup came out yesterday, and my immediate thought was they're trying to get Frederick going as much as they're trying to get Wallstrom going. Like it's Coyle. What do you think of Coyle?
No, I think they were trying to get Coyle going. If putting Trent Frederic with Oliver Wahlstrom and uh, Justin Brazeau and putting Brazeau on his off wing and putting Frederic in the middle is his way of trying to get Trent Frederic going, then man, he's not an NHL coach.
So you think this was more about getting Coyle going?
Yeah,
Okay, what did you think of Coyle on the right side? We've
they're
seen it before, and it hasn't looked good.
I didn't mind him yesterday. It was a hard game to judge. Um, but if you go to the Edmonton game where they moved him to the right side, he looked good. But I'm not basing anything on that game against Buffalo,
Do you stick with this
other
lineup
than
against Washington tomorrow? Is it Washington tomorrow?
yeah.
Yeah. Do you stick with the same lineup tomorrow?
Um, no, I put Brazil back on the right side on line two, only because you want a bigger body. Not that he uses it, but you want a bigger body with Marchand and Lindholm, uh, just in case they're out there against Tom Wilson. Um, and then I put Coyle back between Frederic and Wahlstrom.
Okay. Kind of see what that results in. Um, let's
I think Beecher needs to sit for a couple of games.
Okay. So what would you do for the fourth line? Kepke, Kostelik, and McLaughlin?
Yeah, Beecher needs to sit.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it would hurt him at all. He's starting to kind of regress a little bit compared to where he's been, and usually he responds to a night off. So let's see. Kendall says, "When do you think Poitras gets another chance?" Kevin responds with, "I let Poitras cook for a good long while down in Providence. He's gaining a ton of confidence, and this will help him when he's back with the team." Matrix agrees with that sentiment. What do you think about Poitras getting a call up? I know other people are going to ask about Merkulov and Lysell and some of that stuff, and we're going to dive a lot more into what those players' games look like right now as the break comes up tomorrow. But as far as calling them up and having an effect on this NHL roster, what do you think?
I can guarantee you one thing and one thing only. It's not happening before December 29th.
Yeah. I mean, the roster freeze, obviously, but
Well, no, they can bring him up despite the roster freeze. They just don't have cap space to do it.
oh yeah, fair.
They can bring a player up. They can bring 5 players up. There's no roster limit. There's just no cap space. They got 600K. Um, what's Patra on an $875,000 contract? Where's the money to bring him
Um,
up?
right now he is 870 even. So
870.
yeah, close enough.
So
Right, I'll consider that right on the dot. So yeah,
they don't
there's
have the
really
money.
nobody that
They
they can
can't.
call up. They don't have anybody.
They 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 can't send McLaughlin down because of the roster freeze. So, like I said, all I can guarantee you is, well, no roster freeze. So they can't even put Lindholm on LTIR.
Right.
Actually, they can because it's retro. So they could. They could
Yeah, they
technically
could
put
retroactive
Lindholm on LTIR and bring him up, but they're not going to. Bruins want
I
to
just I
avoid LTIR.
Yeah, and I also don't see the need right now. You've got enough that you're trying to sort out with the NHL roster. Um, what problem does Matthew Poitras solve for you right now by calling him up?
Adds a weapon to the power play.
He adds a weapon to the power
adds
play, but
adds
what
some
problem
offense
does he
to
solve?
a weapon on the power play. Do you know how bad the power play is, Chris?
It's atrocious. I know.
Right. So
I
he's a
know.
weapon on the power play. There's no offense from the third line as constructed the way it was yesterday. This team had its best offensive opportunities when Matthew Poitras was on the roster and he was on the ice.
I know. And he looks damn good in Providence. He really does. Um, I, I love the fact though that right now he's getting 18 minutes a night. Like, you can't teach time on ice. So let's see. Tyler asks. We'll get back to. Actually, let's finish up Poitras real quick. Mike says, why not treat him like Lorai last year? Bring him up, give him another taste, and give him something specific to work on in the A. Thoughts
It's
on?
simple. There is no cap space. It's that simple.
I know they want to avoid LTIR, and there's a solution there and whatever. But cap space aside, the idea of bringing him up, you could send McLaughlin down for that call up. What giving him an assignment essentially, letting him play a little bit, and then saying, "Okay, here's your assignment to go back and learn in the American Hockey League," like they did with Mason Lohrei. Just thoughts on that process. Is that something that you think they should consider doing?
No.
I think they should just let him cook. I'm with that. Kendall says play Poitras on the third line and put Coyle on the second right wing. JD says leave Poitras in Providence unless there's an injury. Let's see. And then two other really good questions. First one from Tyler. Do you swap out NED against Washington, as in Witherspoon in for Lohrei? Thoughts on defensive change?
I would consider it.
What's that?
Yes, I would really seriously consider it.
I would. I don't mind that. And then David Palmer with the question: when do you expect the title interim coach to be settled?
I don't know. Right now, they're actively looking for an assistant coach. So I think that's priority number one.
Yeah, I think depending on who they find out there, um, is Sacco ready to fully be the guy? I don't know. I wouldn't really put too much focus on the interim tag. He's the guy right now, and that's what matters. I wouldn't expect them to move on from Sacco at least until the off season.
Yeah.
Kevin says,
I don't know.
go ahead.
No, I'm not too worried about the coaching situation. I do hope that they find an assistant coach and very soon.
Yeah, would definitely help alleviate some of the responsibilities on Sacco as well.
I would go in a different route as well than what every NHL team does. Having one guy concentrate on the PP and one guy concentrate on the PK. I would find the best special teams coach out there that can coach both, take care of both situations, um, and letting Sacco and Kelly do their things with the defense and the forwards. Um, I don't know why more NHL teams don't do that, but that's what I would look for. A special teams coach that does the PK, the PP, um, 6-on-5 with the goaltender pulled. That's his job. Work on those. Break down the other teams and the way they play it, and coach your special teams directly to that.
Yeah, Kevin says, in my opinion, the only thing Poitras really needed was a confidence boost, and he's getting that. He's fine where he is right now. Bruins have a winning record under Sacco, so I'm leaving that alone right now. But Matrix, on the same page as me, any ideas on who's out there for that type of assistant coaching gig?
No.
If you knew, you'd be the general manager of the Boston Bruins.
If I knew, I am probably asked not to say anything
That's true too.
if I knew.
So let's see. Were there other major things that you really wanted to touch on, Dom? Did you want to run through each game individually at all? I know we kind of talked about the trip overall. You got the game against the Flames and the Oilers, and then finally back home against the Sabres, which we really talked about that one quite a bit. Um, David, what are your thoughts on Bergeron becoming power play coach? I'm not sure he wants it.
No,
Uh,
I wouldn't either.
from what I've seen in interviews and just the things he has been doing when he's asked about life after hockey, that dude is happy right now and he deserves it. He is thrilled to be playing dad and seeing his kids, spending time with his family. Eh, he's doing, you know, um fundraising stuff, alumni stuff. Like he's participating in organizational events and things like that. But I don't think he's ready to become a full time coach right now. I think he's going to just continue to spend some time with the kids and enjoy that as he should.
Definitely. I can see him returning to the organization in some capacity, but I don't see it as a coach. I don't.
No. Do you think he could join McQuaid's team in player development? Do you see that as a path for him?
I see him more in a scouting role,
Okay.
um, as opposed to player development. One
I was
thing,
just curious.
I, I hate seeing great players go behind the bench and not succeeding. It's sort of, I don't want to say it devalues what they've done on the ice in their careers, uh, but it's just fans expect so much more. You look at when Wayne Gretzky stepped behind the bench, arguably one of the best one or two players to ever play the game, and basically bombed. Um, it's just let them keep their reputation as great players, and let them do parts of the game that are behind the scenes, so they're not in the public light all the time, like coaching.
Yeah, I would say let them find their own path. Some of them are going to find a path that
Yeah,
coaching suits them, but others like Gretzky, I mean, he's on the TNT panel and he does a fine job there. I think one of the harder things that we've found with a guy like Gretzky is just because he can see the ice in a certain way doesn't mean he can teach others to see it that way. And when you're trying to explain, oh, you do this over here because this player's going to do this, other players are can sometimes be sitting there looking at you going, what the fuck is he talking about? And you can't
yeah,
teach, like like I said, you can't teach time on ice. You can't teach everybody's way of seeing the game, and not everybody can learn it. So some players coaching is just not their gig. And if it's not Bergeron's thing, then fine. Let him find what it is. You're seeing Patrick Waugh struggle with the Islanders right now. His first go around looked pretty damn good. So, um, Bruins sitting there third place in the division, as we talked about. Any other eh, eh, any questions from the viewers? I want to make sure. I mean, obviously, you guys see that we're pulling up the comments, the questions. So we want to see what questions you guys may have here. But and obviously, thank you all for being here. We would try to go for another 20 minutes, but Dom, you got any other major thoughts on your mind about this Bruins team? Because I, we could talk about Providence, but that's tomorrow's show.
yeah. I think we covered pretty much everything. It's it is what it is.
There was.
I, I,
Go ahead.
I think we're seeing that Sacco's vision of this team is really starting to come through. Last night's game, the exception, and we talked about why. But I know a lot of people were when Montgomery was coach was like, what is the Bruins' actual system? What is it? And then it kind of spilled over to talking about Sacco, but they expected an immediate change to happen overnight. You guys have heard me say it a million times. The first 9 games were like a mini training camp. Now we're starting to see it, and
Yeah.
4 points out of
There
first.
was a question from Matrix. I know as posed, it's not one that you really want to deal with. I'm going to tweak it a little bit, but his question was back when we were talking about Frederic and the St. Louis connection. His question was, if St. Louis is serious, what's the return? Roster player, picks, a package of both, etc. I'm going to tweak it just a little bit simply because my question to you is, if you're looking to move on from a Trent Frederic player, given the Bruins' current situation, are you looking for a player or are you looking for picks? If you're going the player route, are you looking at a prospect or a current NHLer? What's your target? Is a more broad question.
Let me say this, give you a long, complicated answer to dealing with St. Louis. I know Doug Armstrong is general manager for Team Canada uh, for the Olympics, and Don Sweeney is part of that management team. They worked together in the past for Team Canada. Um, Armstrong is involved with Hockey Canada, and Don Sweeney is on the management team for Team Canada at the Four Nations. So, those of you that have followed me for a few years know what I'm about to say. And those of you that don't, well, you're about to learn something. So, way back in 2018, 2019, the Bruins were involved with talks with St. Louis for Braden Shen. I was the only person breaking the news. I knew the players that were involved. I refused to put the names out there because until the trade happens, you don't want players finding out about it and then wondering, am I going to be here? Am I not going to be here? I just don't feel like doing that to players. And it wasn't till a few months, I took a lot of heat for that because I stuck to my guns, said it was happening. Um, but nobody else had the trade until 4 or 5 months later when Elliot Friedman wrote an article, had talked to Braden Shen, and Shen was told he went to bed one night thinking he was going to wake up a Boston Bruin the next day because a trade was imminent. It didn't come from anything I was reporting. He was told by the Blues that a deal was going to be done. Okay. Here's the thing, I knew every detail about every proposal on that trade. They agreed to a trade, Sweeney and Armstrong. Um, Armstrong went back to Sweeney and changed the deal. Sweeney agreed to it a second time. Armstrong went back and changed the deal a third time. And Sweeney agreed to it a third time. Armstrong tried to change the deal, and Sweeney said, "Wait a minute, what are you doing here? Like, I'm not dealing with you." And that's how the trade fell apart. Because Armstrong was trying to bleed him and bleed him and bleed him more each and every time by increasing the return on the trade.
Of course. I mean, you got to respect trying to get the biggest return package that you can. That's Armstrong doing his
But
job.
when you've agreed 3 times,
Yes,
Chris,
that's pushing it. That's
no.
absolutely pushing it.
That's pushing it. So I'm afraid that dealing with Doug Armstrong that's what it's like. I will say this, and I wrote in the article I wrote, when the source said to me, or would not confirm whether there's been discussions between Armstrong and Sweeney regarding Trent Frederic, that both are involved with Team Canada. They've had plenty of discussions over the past few months, almost exclusively about Team Canada and rosters for the 4 nations in the Olympics. But I don't doubt for 1 second that Armstrong has probably asked Sweeney, "Hey, what are you doing with Trent Frederic?" No doubt in my mind. I just can't get anybody to confirm it.
Right. I mean, I agree with you. There's no doubt in my mind that they haven't had those conversations. They have had those conversations. The question, like you said, becomes to what degree. And even if they've talked about returns and a package, would you do it for this X, Y, and Z? You really need to know what both GMs have in their thought process and what they're looking for. Because I can sit here and say, yeah, okay, Trent Frederic to the Blues for a second round pick. Well, the Blues don't have a second round pick, and so now you can say, okay, well then do the first round pick. Well, they don't have at that point they don't have a first, a second, a third, and I don't believe a fourth. So
they have three picks next year.
Right, if I'm not mistaken, a first, a fifth, and a sixth.
First, fifth, and seventh, I believe.
Okay. Either way, their middle of the draft is decimated. They don't have picks. So you're now pushing out for 2026 second for Trent Frederic? I don't know. That just doesn't seem like a logical thing. A couple ideas that can be thrown around out there, but again, they'd be a little bit bigger, and you really have to be willing to part ways with something if you want something in return, which a lot of people don't seem to get when it comes to trades. Throw some rolls of duct tape, a shooter tutor, and a bag of pucks, and all of a sudden you can get Connor McDavid. It doesn't work like that. So, that I know, Dom, that's a huge reason why you don't like dealing in the hypotheticals of trade talk. So, let's see. JD, back on our conversation about Bergeron. At some point, I could see him moving into upper management. Matrix says Tampa lost, so that's a good, but Florida beat them, and that sucks. And then Steve says 2 games against Columbus should be a good test for coach adjustments. Well, yeah, we've seen how games against weak teams have gone lately, so maybe that might be a maybe there. Kevin says, I can't wait for Dom to do draft coverage next year. I'm so excited for that.
Oh, I'm already working on it, Kevin. Trust me. I normally would have been in a rink today and raced home to do this show, but the OHL is off this week. I want to go back to Frederic and the Blues for a second, Chris.
Sure.
Would I trade Trent Frederic for a St. Louis Blues first round pick this year? And my answer is yes.
Mhm.
The Blues right now are 15, 16, and 4, 34 points, and are 5 points outside the wild card spot with two teams to jump. And I think Utah is one of them, and they're tied 4-4 right now, I believe. Um, Dallas is the other one. So if St. Louis were to agree to that, they'd want some sort of protection with the pick.
Yeah.
And the Bruins probably don't want that. St. Louis has some nice prospects uh, to come up. But I think Don Sweeney would like a younger player who could help now and help in the future. Here's the thing. Here's what I think Don Sweeney wants. Don Sweeney wants Trent Frederic signed to a contract they can mutually both agree to and live with and return back to form. I think that would be Don Sweeney's ideal solution. I don't think he wants to trade him.
I don't think he wants to, but I think he understands. I mean, he's an intelligent general manager. He knows the situation. I think he's going to try to let things die down over the break, see where things come back. He's not ignorant enough to just get to the trade deadline and go, I didn't get a deal done. I thought I'd resign him. Oops, my bad. If he chooses not to trade Frederic, it's because they see Frederic as an integral part of this year's team for some reason. And some of that has to play out between December 22nd and what's the trade deadline? What is it this year?
March 14th, I
March
believe.
14th or whatever. So
I think so.
let's see. Where David says, what's the odds that Bruins get nothing for Frederic? Frederic becomes and signs with the Blues on July 1st. I mean, yeah, this is the other question, David. What do we know what Frederic wants? I don't. I don't think Dom. I don't think you know what Frederic
I don't.
wants. So there's a fine line, and one of the things that we know about Don Sweeney is he knows how to do this. Last year, Jake DeBrusk was an integral part of this team. It is what it is. Whether he wanted to be here or not, he was playing for a contract. So keeping him here had value for the team and for Jake DeBrusk. He goes out and he signs a massive deal with Vancouver. Good for him. It's working for him. If Boston dealt him at the trade deadline last year, they don't end their season the way they end their season. We don't know how it happens, but they're definitely likely a weaker team. Kevin says there's no excuse if Don knows Freddie isn't coming back and he doesn't trade him at the deadline. Zero excuse. Well, Kevin, let's see what happens between
Right.
today and
I no, he's absolutely right. There's no excuse. This team, as constructed, is not a contender, is not a legitimate contender. If they were a legitimate contender, I could see keeping them as their own rental. But they're not. So what's the point of keeping him if you know he's going to walk? That is the worst asset management a GM could possibly do at the NHL level.
I agree with that sentiment. My question to you is between today and March 14th, can things for this team change?
Sure, they can. Just like they did for St. Louis. But going into the playoffs, you never considered St. Louis a legitimate contender back then either.
Right. But if they made a trade off of their roster, then they don't make that run. So everybody wants to give credit for what moves they did make, the coaching change, putting Binnington in that, and all that stuff, which were the right moves. They literally pushed every button correctly. It's not a 0%. I agree. It is super low. And trading, as of right now, trading Frederic to get something in return is the best plan. However, it is not a 0% chance that leaving Frederic here in Boston is a move that could pay off for them if things between now and March 14th change for this organization to a positive way. Unlikely as it is, it's not 0%. Like Kevin said, not enough
It's
to
not
make them
more
a
than 5% either.
Again, but it's not 0. So I'm not trading him
But it's
today.
not more than 5.
Aside from the roster freeze, I'm not trading him today.
But Chris, to trade him today, somebody's going to have to overpay.
Yeah. Someone has to pay. Oh, you don't think people
So
are going to get desperate to
you
overpay at the trade deadline?
you have to consider what the offer is. If somebody gives you an offer for Trent Frederic today that you don't think you're going to get at trade deadline, you pull the trigger. Because let's not forget, if Trent Frederic goes on today till trade deadline and is the same player we've seen for 34 games so far this year, nobody's paying that same price on trade deadline. Yeah, every move is created because of a consequence, and to sit and wait could devalue him. You have
Absolutely.
to take that into consideration as
Absolutely.
well. Not on some miracle chance that the Bruins become a contender by March 14th.
Right. I
There's a
would.
greater chance. There's a greater chance he devalues himself by March 14th than there is the Bruins becoming a contender,
I
a
agree.
serious
I
contender.
absolutely agree. And that's why I'm saying right now, there clearly isn't an offer on the table worth pulling the trigger on.
We don't know that. We don't know that. They could have had a deal done on a deal agreed to on December 19th at 10 p.m. Roster freeze takes into effect. Now you've got to wait.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I mean, it's possible. Again, not a 0% chance on that either, but, you know, when's the rosters unfreeze? What did we say, the 29th?
Yep.
So I agree with Bruce here. I'm not paying him $4 million plus. Someone else can do that.
And somebody will.
Oh, yeah, easily. Michael's got a good question, though. Do you think these rumors affect Trent Frederic? How aware would he be of them, and could it really have something going on in his head for how he's playing?
Well, he's not Morgan Geeky and checking
Only Bruins fan page.
Googling himself on the internet to find out what's being said. The thing is Trent Frederic has sucked from game 1 of the season. Yes, the rest of the team did for a period of time as well. Okay. The trade Frederic stuff didn't begin at the start of the season. And it's only really taken a life of its own just before the coaching change.
Yeah.
So,
well, it helps that
Frederic
Montgomery went to St. Louis.
Yeah. Frederic was affected by something prior to the rumors.
Yeah, Kevin says if you can get another first-round pick in this upcoming draft, you don't think about it, you do it. Absolutely. I just don't think it's coming from the St. Louis Blues, who don't have a second, third, fourth, or fifth either. if the Blues are offering you a first round pick, it's either, like you said, conditional or it's next year. Now, would you do a 2026 first rounder for Frederic? How
No,
much?
because you can get more for him next.
Exactly. So it really comes down to it. I will share with you off the air something that I have on a Frederic thing. Not like breaking news or anything like that, but I agree with Bruins meat here. I'm trading everyone. I'm not resigning this year. If I don't plan on re-signing someone, yes. If there's value to them as a trade piece, absolutely. The question is who are those people? Frederic for me is one of those people, but we'll see. And as Michael pointed out, Sweeney and Armstrong going to be spending a lot of hours together for Four Nations. They already have spent a lot of time together with Four Nations rosters being put together. So I definitely think that helps them have chat and try to work towards something. But like you said, Dom, if that's how negotiating with Armstrong goes, Sweeney may not want much to do with it. He may sit there and go, if you want him, here's the deal. We're not negotiating it 6 times to Sunday. So
This is the draft I want a first round pick in. Fans I talk to say this draft sucks. So I'm like, no, man, no. Like, this draft does not suck.
So before we head out, because it is the 8 o'clock hour now, Bruce says if you get a first and your first, you can move up into the juicy part of the draft. Would you rather, based on your comment just now about the draft, would you rather have a higher first round pick, or if you're the Bruins, have 2 first round picks? Where does the Bruins have more value?
We're talking about this specific draft, right?
Yes.
Like
This
2025?
coming up draft, if you're the Bruins, would you rather have 2 first round picks or use those 2 to move up, let's say, to somewhere between 7 and 12?
Okay, if the season ended today, where would the Bruins be picking?
Let's see. I will do the reverse, just based off of reverse standing. They are the 12th
Yeah.
team in the league right now.
So that would be 20th.
So yeah, they'd be picking 20th. So if you have the 20th
And St. Louis is where?
they're 21st in the league, so that would be the 11th pick.
I'm keeping the 2 picks.
Okay.
I would love to get one of the.
Normally, I would agree with Big Bad Bruin Joe. Top 10 pick more valuable, but if you're picking at 11, you're just outside that door.
There's really 4 guys that should get serious consideration for top overall pick. That's how good the top 4, maybe even 5 is. But if you're picking 11th, you're getting an excellent hockey player. And then at 20th, you're getting a very good hockey player. I'm keeping the 2.
Okay.
I don't think 11 and 20 would be enough to get you into at least the top 4 with how good those top 4 players are.
Yeah, no, you'd probably have to include those 2 plus your 2026 if someone was willing to move. That's the other thing is the top 4 teams have to be willing to move the pick. So when you're picking that high in the draft, though, some of these guys are maybe a year, maybe 2 years away from being NHL ready. You don't usually move on from those kinds of guys. So Bruins mate says, "Are you re-signing Brazeau, Geeky, Beecher, Frederic, Wahlstrom, all of them basically?" Basically saying, "I want to keep Kostelic and Brazeau for sure." So just we'll run through these real quick before we head out. Would you re-sign Brazeau? Obviously, I think they're all with the caveat of assuming the money and term fit.
No, I let him walk.
Brazeau, you'd let walk. What about Geeky?
Yeah. Geeky's an RFA with arbitration rights. He's not going anywhere.
Beecher.
RFA with arbitration rights. He's not going anywhere.
Frederic.
UFA, I trade him.
Wahlstrom.
RFA with arbitration rights. I do believe not going anywhere.
Kostelic.
I'm resigning.
Kepke.
I'm resigning.
Wotherspoon.
RFA, is he not?
I can let you know while I look that up. What about Mark McLaughlin?
Group 6 UFA. I would re-sign him, but it's up to McLaughlin. He controls his destiny because he's a Group 6.
And yes, Wotherspoon is a UFA.
Based on the depth and Providence, I keep him. Unless you can get somebody else to fill his role.
Yeah. Real quick, Bruins Meat says, oh, wait, I think Beecher and Brazeau have more years left. Well, let's take a look.
No,
Is
they
an
don't.
RFA. And Brazeau, if I can find him on the list here, he is a UFA.
Oh, wait, Brazeau?
Brazeau is a UFA.
Yeah.
Unrestricted for Brazeau and then restricted for Beecher. So I don't think either one are going to take all that much to re-sign. I would re-sign, again, depending on the money. Brazeau, maybe I would give him consideration depending on how the rest of his year goes. I'm not quite decided on him. Geeky, like you said, Arbrights, Beecher, same thing. Wahlstrom, none of those guys I think are planned on going anywhere. Frederic, I would trade. Kostelic and Kepke, I'd try to bring back. Wotherspoon, exactly the same thing that you said. You don't have a lot of depth, especially guys who can play the right side. It might be his offside, but if he's your best option as a fourth guy on that side, you got to keep him around, especially because you just lost Regula. So, and then McLaughlin, let's see how he goes the rest of the season. He's another one not fully decided on. Like you said, it's up to him if he really wants to stay in Boston. I could see another team coming in and giving him some offers. He is a useful player. He might price himself out of where you want him to be at. So I wouldn't mind seeing him take a $1 million contract somewhere else. And if we're offering him $850,000, he would take it. So, anyways, it is a little after 8:00 here. Dom, any final thoughts?
Just to answer Kevin's question there about Brad Marchand, 1 year deals going forward with bonuses.
Yeah, that's the way you got to do it, because especially now with the way that he's coming back from the surgery and health-wise, just do that treatment with him. Keep going with it. So with that, all I got left on is go Bees.
Yeah, and if you're not able to join us tomorrow for the Prospects show, I want to wish everybody a safe and happy Christmas. And just there, no drinking and driving.
Yes, you reminded me. Tomorrow's show, we are actually going to be coming on here at 6 p.m. We are going to do an hour-long pregame show about the Prospects. So thank you for reminding me of that. We will be here tomorrow, 6 p.m., right here with the Dom.Hockey podcast show live. Also presented by our friends over at IceShaker. Check them out at IceShaker.com. Order yours today. I got my Bruins one right here. It is phenomenal. The ice lasts over 30 hours, so it's awesome. Check them out, though. And again, go Bees.
Go Bees.